Hello guys, welcome back to the second part of the Alephium Rhone upgrade explained. So if you hadn't seen in the first part, we went over what I think is the main information that you need to know. This second part is just kind of like additional changes that you should probably know about if you're heavily into the tech or a developer that's looking to go to Alephium. So we're just going to go through basically the list of everything that we left out of the first video because they took a little bit longer to explain. And we're just going to go through them all now. Remember, if you haven't watched the first video, the Rhone upgrade is going live June 12th, 10 AM GMT. So we'll see it on mainnet at that time. Obviously, we'll be making videos around that time as well. So this video is in collaboration with BlockFlow Alliance DIO. So the goal is to be the voice of the Alephium community and contribute to the growth of the ecosystem. So go give them a follow. Everything that I use in this video will be linked in the description, as well as BlockFlow Alliance DIO. So in the first video, we covered the reduced target block times, sequential transactions, the new proof of less work addresses that we have here, and then reduced contract deposit and gasless transactions. These were the ones that I felt like were the most kind of information that you guys needed to know as like people that are mining it or getting into it. There will be a little mining section at the end of this video talking about the blocks per second on the network and how that actually ties into mining or how they're gonna rearrange the mining structure, and maybe a bit about proof of less work. So let's just start off with the modified reorg depth protection. The maximum reorg depth has been adjusted to 200, reducing the reorg window from 106 minutes down to 53 minutes. So what that means is that it currently was at 400, because it would be 400 blocks times by the 16 seconds to give you 106 minutes in the reorg window. So it was 400 blocks, but now it's actually been taken down to 200. So if you don't know what a reorg depth is in cryptocurrency, it's a very simple thing. It's basically to protect against attacks on the network. And it's a big thing that's going on right now actually in the Alephium network when we see the hash rate going up. If you look on the Explorer here, if we get off the testnet right now, we can go to mainnet. You can see that the hash rate has risen massively and is still rising because of that FPGA farm on the network. So it's actually important to implement some of these reorg depth things, as we'll get into explaining what it means right now. So this is just in the case of BCH, but you can apply it to any other cryptocurrency. Being a relatively small chain, this was written quite a while ago. It faces some issues with an attack where an attacker amasses enough hashing power to secretly build a longer chain than the chain everybody knows about. So basically what we're seeing on the Alephium network right now, I don't think that they're trying to take over the chain, but it is a potential for attack if the wrong people get a hold of that hash rate. When the attacker broadcasts the blocks on his own chain, they cause a reorg that goes back however long the attacker secretly mined. Could be days, weeks, hours, months, years. It says here that somebody had threatened to do that on the BCH chain. The usual rule for when to accept the transaction as irreversible is 6 transactions, which is used by most exchanges and the like. Not only can the attacker with this reorg cause this to blow up, but he can also specifically craft transactions to go into one block and then say send coins to an exchange, so a Binance, but in the reorg exclude those transactions and include another transaction that he spends to his own wallet. And this is what's called a double spend. So this is the risk that you're running with 51% attacks, is that people can start double spending on the network and then broadcast the blocks before anyone really notices on the network, and therefore execute a successful, damaging, double spend attack. So the larger the block depth reorg that you have on a chain basically means the more blocks that an attacker could put into. So we're going from 400 down to 200, so we're reducing that reorg window. It did say on there that the blocks for BCH were 6 in terms of the reorg depth. But with Alephium as a faster chain than BCH, you would have, 200 instead of the 6 that they're working on. But I believe if they were working on 10-minute block times, then we would have basically the same amount in minutes. Because if you have 6 blocks at 10 minutes, it's basically an hour. But 200 gives us 53 minutes. So they're trying to kind of conform to the standard, I guess, and put safety measures in place for the Alephium chain. And then we'll move down to permission testnet mining. Right now, as we can see on the testnet, if you click here, the hash rate has actually started to steady out a little bit. I believe it's because only People that have permission can mine on the testnet. This is just to keep everything running smoothly whilst they're doing the changes, and they can get good data for the actual network so that when it does go over to mainnet, everything is in place. So there was hash rate spikes here. I believe that this was actually some sort of FPGA or ASIC testing back there. And then if we move past that, we have the map support, so new instructions and language syntax now support map structures in Ralph. So explained here by the Alephium team, mapping is like having a spreadsheet with a search filter. It simplifies storing and accessing data, whilst also encouraging developers and users to keep the chain lean. So basically not over bloating and having a lot of data that shouldn't realistically be on the chain because it's just taking up more data. You don't want it to bloat. And mapping basically makes it easier for devs to go in, pick things, match them to different things. They can search and stuff like that. As it says here, map is one of the most requested features that has been asked by devs. We could use map with subcontracts, but it's not convenient or friendly enough. So we'll introduce map to Ralph in the Rhone upgrade. Looks like it's very doable with the current VM. The design will be based on subcontracts, but they will abstract out the details. To move on, key value pairs are fundamental concepts in computing, linking an identifier to a piece of data. So let's just say that you had a yellow highlighter and you yellow highlighted a bunch of data in a text. That's basically the most simple way of, having a key and a piece of data. The key is the name and the value is the content. For example, the key might be city and the value might be Berlin. Mapping is a set of key value pairs. As you can see in this hash table, Alephium uses subcontracts to implement this mapping feature. To prevent that from happening, each map entry is implemented as a subcontract. When inserting an item into the map, it takes a small amount of deposit, which will be returned when the map entry is removed. So for those people that are devs on the network, this is all for you basically to know about this stuff. As subcontract development is not free, devs are incentivized to write optimized code to keep their costs low. So they're kind of incentivizing devs to clean up the network, keep it lean, and the way that they're going to do this is obviously have a fee for subcontracts on the network. TLDR, mapping offers a familiar tool for developers to build dApps on Alephium. This enhances the dev experience, making it easier to create more features for even more powerful products, and therefore a nice cycle that we have going on there. And then next up we have multiple inheritance, added support for multiple inheritance for improved code organization and reusability. Dynamic method dispatch, methods can now be dispatched dynamically based on their signatures. Upgrade retracency protection. Retracency protection has been upgraded from contract level to a method level approach. This makes it more efficient and more flexible, I believe, and also kind of focuses security measures where they're most needed on the network. It is very complex to do it at a method level approach instead of a contract level, so it's obviously going to be more complex, and there is some kind of risk of omission, which means that if you don't correct stuff within the chain or the code, that basically means that you're leaving it open, as the functions are kind of unprotected if you obviously don't catch them in time. Receive in only modes, contract methods now receive payment multiple times within the same transaction. That's pretty self-explanatory, so you can now receive payments multiple times within the same transaction. When you're sending from and to, same thing. Gasless transactions, we already covered that in the previous video. Zero amount token functions. Built-in functions related to tokens now support zero amounts. So I don't really know the uses, particularly for zero amount token functions, just because I would assume that people would want to assign, some sort of fees to buy it or sell. I don't know, maybe it could be something that's not really worth anything on the network, so you just give it a zero amount. So normally I believe that in smart contracts or tokens, you do a check for zero amounts and you actually exclude them. So these are going to be included. It just opens up a lot more broader use cases for certain things on the network that I don't really have that much of a depth of information on, but I know that it could help some developers in that way. Mutable new contracts. Contracts can utilize fields in the same transaction in which they are created. This is probably just more for a usability thing. That's probably going to improve a lot of usability, probably reduce gas fees on the network as well if you're able to actually put it into one transaction instead of creating multiple back and forths. As I said, a lot of these that we're covering are just mainly for developers. If you're looking for Alephium as an investment vehicle, you can see that the developers are making a lot on the network, and making it easier for people to come in and develop is one of the main driving factors. So it's important that we have all of these changes, and you don't have to fully understand them, but it's important that people have these little changes that can make their life easier for developers. Then we have new built-in functions, introduced minimal contract deposit and map entry deposit, and other built-in functions. Probably on the side of developers is going to make smart contracts more efficient to develop, puts a standardized way to develop on the smart contracts, where you're basically reducing the code so that things can be done quicker. So smart contract development is going to be done better if you reduce the amount of code that has to be input, which is obviously going to minimize mistakes on the smart contract as well. And then lastly, increased limits, transaction gas limit and contract bytecode size limits have been increased for greater flexibility. This is also going to allow the developers to create heavier applications with basically a lot more data that can be stored or used within the applications that they are making. So that's all the additional changes that we have covered. So as I said, it's going to be coming on June 12th, 10 a.m. GMT. I'm just going to cover some little bit more things that I think we should talk about in terms of the Rhone upgrade. The mining side, I think that the block times, if I'm correct, the block reward should in theory drop by a factor of 4, just because the chain has now split that up and there's more blocks coming onto the network. So I believe that the threshold then for solo mining is also going to go down as well. So when we see blocks coming onto the network, it's going to be 4 times as much than what we're seeing right now. And that basically means that the block reward has to go from the original, I don't know what it is currently right now, maybe 1.85, something like that, down to whatever that is divided by 4. And obviously if you have a lower amount of hash rate, then you can mine Alephium at a lower solo hash rate value and hit blocks on the network, more regularly. If you look there, the block reward's 2.16, so the block time's 4 seconds, dropping down to 1 second. So that means that this block reward is obviously going to be divided by 4, and we'll see how that plays out for miners. So just to reiterate, this is coming out June 12th, 10 a.m. GMT. Stick around on the channel for videos all about that, and go follow Blockflow Alliance Dio for more information on Alephium and the Rhone upgrade. Make sure you like the video and subscribe for more content like this.